Dozens arrested at Yale and NYU as pro-Palestinian student protests spread. So obviously, the Gaza Solidarity encampment at Columbia University was the first, and given the police crackdown on that, a bunch of other sister solidarity protests, if you will, sprung up at prestigious universities around the country. Police arrested dozens of people at pro-Palestinian demonstrations at Yale University in Connecticut and New York University in Manhattan as student protests over Israel's war in Gaza continue to roil U.S. campuses. On the Yale University campus in New Haven, authorities arrested at least 47 protesters on Monday evening, the university said in a statement. Students who were arrested will be referred for disciplinary action. The police crackdowns came after Columbia University canceled in-person classes on Monday in response to protesters setting up tent encampments at its New York City campus last week. Several hundred people had been protesting on the Yale University campus, demanding the university divest from military weapons manufacturers. Yale said it had repeatedly asked students to leave and warned them they could face law enforcement and disciplinary action if they didn't. In New York, officers moved on an encampment at Gould Plaza near NYU shortly after nightfall. There, too, hundreds of demonstrators had defied university warnings that they faced consequences if they failed to vacate the plaza. Video on social media showed police taking down tents in the protesters' encampment in a tense and at times chaotic scene. Some officers tossed tents and others grappled with demonstrators. Protesters tussled with officers and chanted, "We will not stop, we will not rest, disclose, divest." A New York police spokesperson said arrests were made after the university asked police to enforce trespassing violations, but the total number of arrests and citations would remain unknown until much later. The Washington Square News, the student newspaper, reported that the NYPD said over a loudspeaker announcement that students were being arrested for disorderly conduct and that protesters were unlawfully blocking traffic. The law enforcement actions at Yale and NYU came after a tense few days on campuses across the U.S. Columbia University President Namat Minouche Shafik called in New York police last week to clear a tent encampment, as we covered, on its main lawn of students demanding the university divest from companies with ties to Israel. More than 100 students were arrested on Thursday on charges of trespassing, and the university and the affiliated Barnard College have suspended dozens of students involved in the protests. On Monday, Columbia announced it was canceling in-person classes on its New York City campus to try and reset the situation and, quote, de-escalate the rancor. A new encampment has now emerged, and hundreds of faculty members have held a mass walkout to protest against the president's handling of the situation. So let's take a look at this walkout moment at Columbia. This was a faculty walkout. So that's a pretty impressive crowd out there, given this is after the police cracked down on two separate protests, because they first raided the encampments on the day of the testimony, whatever that was, Thursday, and then they had another round of arrests over the weekend. Bassem Kawaha, I think I said that name right, Kawaha, an adjunct lecturer at Columbia Law School and supervising attorney at the school's human rights clinic, told The Guardian she was shocked and appalled that the president went immediately to the New York Police Department. This was, by all accounts, a nonviolent protest, she said. It was a group of students camping out on the lawn in the middle of campus. It's not any different from everyday life on campus. After the crackdown at Columbia, students across the U.S. launched their own protests in solidarity, many of them calling for their universities to back a ceasefire in Gaza and divest from companies with ties to Israel. Students at Brown, Princeton, and Northwestern held protests on Friday and over the weekend. Students at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Emerson College, both in the Boston area, have started their own protest encampments. Other institutions that saw protest actions included Boston University, University of California, Berkeley, and University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Here's a scene from outside NYU of the cops breaking up the protest. This is pretty chaotic, as you can see.
University to leave the area. Please leave the plaza. This is the New York City Police Department. You have been warned by New York University to leave the area. Please leave the plaza now, or you will be arrested for trespass.
Institutions of higher learning, right? What a pastoral environment, right? This is where you learn the value of democracy. This is where you learn what a threat guys like Donald Trump are to democracy. You have been charged with trespassing. You must vacate the plaza, or you will be arrested. It's like this is hell. This is like modern hell. This is a dystopia. Like this could have been a scene in that Civil War movie that we reviewed very easily. I mean, this is a collapse.
We're going to see more and more of this. You know, when me and Jose did the Rachel Maddow thing, that was what, a week and a half after October 7th. At that time, you know, I went over with Jose the possibilities of being arrested and what they can and can't arrest you for. And in the end, they don't need a reason. Disorderly conduct is a catch-all category they love to use when they don't really have a reason. And then, hey, if the judge tosses it, they toss it. But if you've ever been to jail, it's not a fun experience. So at the very least, they fucked with you. They made you sit in that cell for 1 to 3 days, laying on your, side on a cold concrete floor to sleep until you finally saw a judge. It's not a fucking picnic. And they'll do it to break your balls and to discourage people from protesting. I think the chances when me and Jose did that with Maddow, this was all new. They weren't thinking like that. Now, I think you'd have a pretty good chance of getting arrested if you do that going forward. We saw, it wasn't in New York, but we saw the protesters who protested. Chelsea Handler got arrested.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to throw out those constitutional niceties, just like they did in the Vietnam era. This is very much history, at the very least, rhyming.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a point that Nick made last night on RBN. It was a great point. He said that these college students at these like prestigious universities, they are class traders in the best sense of the word, because he said they're using their class privilege to sort of highlight an issue in a way that puts them at less danger than you would be if you were a poor kid. Like the cops, even if the cops arrest these kids will be all right, right? Their parents will have the bail money and they'll get out and they'll deal with it. Also, a cop is a lot less likely to bash the head in of a rich kid than they are to bash the head in of a poor kid, because if you bash a rich kid's head in from Yale, their parents will sue your ass. Yeah, right, exactly. And so these kids are able to push the limits of this fascist system further than working class kids would be able to.
This is just reality. I've said this before. I've been arrested, never for anything really serious, several times. And I am always the only white person in the cell. Now, you're gonna tell me that black and brown people commit crime at a 99 times higher rate than white people? Come on, man. So that is a good, example of the different levels of justice that you're subjected to. There is a class element. You're definitely much more likely to be arrested if they see you working a kind of job where they know you don't have connections, that you're working class. They might go after you. So there is a class element, but there's also a big race element as well. So yeah, when you got these mostly white Columbia students, they are the least in danger from the police of anybody in society. If you look at who ends up in a jail cell, and I can speak to New York City where this story is, yeah, they definitely target people. I don't even think it's necessarily racism per se in a lot of cases, because a lot of those cops doing that are black. They are targeting people who they know they're not going to face repercussions for arresting.
Right. Well, that's what you would call institutional
connected.
racism, right? It's not
It's
personally
institutional.
motivated, on an individual basis, but it is institutional, right, in nature. But yeah, no, these kids are able to push the limits, and they are. And so here they are.
Please leave the plaza now, or you will be arrested for trespass.
Plaza! The plaza! They don't know! They don't know! That these are our streets! That these are our streets! So fuck the streets for Hustler! So fuck the streets for
Good on these kids, man. It's amazing. And this is what futuristic dystopia looks like. It doesn't look futuristic in the moment because it's present. But if 15 years ago you saw footage like that, you would think this is some sort of Orwellian sci-fi universe.
To me, it's a throwback. It's a throwback. It reminds me of the Vietnam era, especially.
Yeah,
with
but
so
look at the
much
gear
of it
they got
focused.
now. Look at the militarization of the
That's
police. I mean, they
true.
look like an occupying army now.
Sure.
They don't look like cops with the wooden
but
sticks
they
and the
used to
hats.
come out in riot gear back
Yeah,
in
they had
those
riot
days
gear,
too.
sure.
They
Yeah.
used to. Especially this being focused on Colombia, which was the focus in New York of the Vietnam era protests.
Yes.
They would shut down the campus all the time. I mean, this is nothing compared to the Vietnam era protests. And as we were talking about on Jimmy's yesterday, hopefully this will grow into that. During that era, at its height, 1/3 of college campuses were shut down by protests every day.
Yep.
If we get there, maybe we can actually stop this thing.
Please clap.